But when we're talking about modal music, we don't now include, we don't call this the harmonic Aeolian or the natural Aeolian. It's just the natural minor and the Aeolian are the same, but it's a matter of when we call it Aeolian or natural minor, and we call it Aeolian when we're in a modal discussion, when we're talking about modes. We call it natural minor when we're talking about tonal music, that is major or minor only. These are not rules that you must follow, but rather they're principles that we tend to find in the music theory community. The last mode, the Locrian, and when I say the last mode, I should clarify the last mode in the sequence of white note modes, has a half step between the first and second degree, like the Phrygian mode. This one has an interesting half step between the fourth and fifth. So I want to show you some modal music and show you how modal music differs from tonal music. I'm going to improvise on white note modes, and I'll say the name of the mode that I'm thinking about. And also to make it distinct from tonal music, you see, tonal music would typically have tonal harmony as well. So there's a bigger context that we're only having a glimpse through when we talk about modes in chapter 4. It's a bigger topic really than just one chapter in the book. But there's an entire genre of modal music where often it will not follow tonal harmony. So I'm going to make what's called a quartal chord. If you know about this, you can pay attention to what harmonies I'm using. A quartal is simply stacked fourths. The advantage of a quartal harmony in this model here is that it takes us out of what we would typically expect to hear in tonal music, which is triads. Now I'm going to play quartal notes, and I'm going to call this first improvisation Dorian because I'm centering my ideas around the pitch D, and I'm accenting it through musical techniques such as beginning and ending, by repeating D a lot and ending and beginning phrases on it. It gives it what we call a centricity, a focus on D. And you'll notice how my chords are more just a rhythmic punctuation, so I've taken away the tonal implications of D minor chord, although I could still play in D Dorian with a regular triad in the left hand. Here's how I've pinpointed to the listener that I'm thinking Dorian. I'm playing what I call a characteristic interval, that is, a minor chord with a whole step between the fifth and sixth, and a half step between the sixth and seventh. Those are what we described in theory as the placement of the half steps, but in real world application, we focus some form of interest around those characteristic intervals. So that's Dorian. And a listener who was familiar with Dorian would hear the mood produced by that sound and associate it with the name Dorian. So at the end of this thought process, we really find that Dorian is nothing more than a label of a particular evocative sound, interestingly created simply by the placement of half steps. Now let's take the same principle to not C Aeolian, which would have to have a half step between 2 and 3, 5 and 6. So that would be the C Aeolian. On a side note here, and to address the question, A Aeolian starts on A and uses the similar scale scale path to C major. C Aeolian starts on the note C and has 3 flats in it in order to fit the location of the half steps where we need them. So A Aeolian and C, or A minor and A Aeolian are the same. A minor and C Aeolian are not only different scales, but you're also mixing the name minor, which belongs more to a tonal description, and Aeolian, which belongs more to a modal conversation. So they're almost 2 separate conversations. Not unlike, say, talking about simple meter and compound meter. Well, they're both under the family of meter, just like modal music and tonal music are both under the family of describing pitch. But modal music has, again, as I said earlier, connotations unique and distinct from tonal music. So now I'm going to make an Aeolian melody with the white note scale path. So I'm going to have to focus on the pitch A. This becomes a centric pitch. So I'm going to improvise and make my idea center around the pitch A. Again, I'm using the more, I would say, open-ended fourths, because as soon as I put a minor chord here, sometimes our ear, because of conditioning, expects to hear tonal music. It's not to say I can't use a minor chord in a modal improvisation. But that reminds us more of tonal music. So opening up the left hand with a quartals, quartal, Q-U-A-R-T-A-L, and stacked fourths, it helps me step further away from the associations with tonal music. So now I can make a modal melody in A Aeolian, and it might sound like this. As I'm doing this, thinking about the characteristic half steps of Aeolian mode, 2 and 3, and 5 and 6. And I'm just moving this structure of fourths up and down the Aeolian mode. So in jazz in particular, the left hand is going to be more rhythmic in this case, and it's a parallel set of intervals that's really further strengthening the feeling of modal, or the sound of modal, where if I played chords, that could still be considered modal, but it would remind us more of tonal music, as I had said earlier. So I'm going to stick with the quartals here, and I want you to listen and hear, try and follow how I use this characteristic half step between 5 and 6 and 2 and 3 to make this sound modal.